election occurs at a moment of crisis for our nation. Moment of crisis for our nation. Moment of crisis for our nation. Crisis. Moment of crisis for our nation. He attacks the terrorism crisis for our crisis for our nation. He attacks the terrorism crisis for our nation. He attacks the terrorism violence in our streets. Chaos, violence, crime, and violence in our nation. He attacks the terrorism violence in our streets. Chaos, violence in our streets. Chaos, violence, crime, and violence. Homicides, killings, shootings, police officers killed. Our nation. He attacks the terrorism violence in our streets. Chaos, violence, crime, and violence. Homicides, killings, shootings, police officers killed. Violence in our streets. Chaos, violence, crime, and violence. Crisis for our nation. He attacks the terrorism violence in our streets. Chaos, violence, crime, and violence. Homicides, killings, shootings, police officers killed. Homicides, killings, shootings, police officers killed. Crisis for our nation. He attacks the terrorism violence in our streets. Chaos, violence, crime, and violence. Homicides, killings, shootings, police officers killed. Homicides, killings, shootings, police officers killed. Crisis for our nation. He attacks the terrorism violence in our streets. Chaos, violence, crime, and violence. Homicides, killings, shootings, police officers killed. 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 Down in flames. America is far less safe. The world is far less safe. Disasters unfolding today. ISIS has spread, helpless to die at the hands of savage killers. Radical Muslim chaos, crisis. The situation is worse than it has ever been before. Death, destruction, terrorism, and weakness. Problems, poverty and violence, war and destruction, terrorism. Crying mothers who have lost their children. Innocent people suffer. Terrible, terrible crimes. Crime and terrorism and lawlessness threatened, so brutally executed. Continued threats and violence. Shot or killed, gunned down, killed, very, very badly injured. Threatening the peace on our streets. America, a more dangerous environment that, frankly, I have ever seen and anybody in this room has ever watched or seen. No illegal immigrants with criminal records, roaming free, domestic disaster, growing threats we face from outside the country. The barbarians of ISIS, brutal Islamic terrorism. Men, women, children, viciously mowed down, lives ruined, families ripped apart, damage and devastation inflicted by Islamic radicals over and over, savagely murdered by an Islamic terrorist. Terrorism, Islamic terrorism, terrorism, immigration, terrorism, violence, hatred, children killed by illegal immigrants, violence spilling across our borders, illegal immigrants with criminal records, roaming free, domestic disaster, one international humiliation after another, one after another. Sailors forced to their knees by their Iranian captors at gunpoint. So brutally murdered. Awful fate. Illegal immigration, the gangs, and the violence, the drugs pouring into our communities. Human smuggling and violence. Radical and dangerous immigration, uncontrolled immigration, mass lawlessness, and dying. Good night. I love you.